Can Sri Lanka stabilize its economy? Amid anti-government protests and a crackdown, the central bank governor announces a bailout. With a $2.9 billion IMF loan almost secure, will Sri Lanka find stability and meet demands for fresh elections? I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's Newsmaker is Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is facing a dire financial crisis triggered by a severe shortage of dollars. Battling a recession, the country has seen its currency plunge alongside steep inflation. The island's 22 million people have also been hit by tax hikes, a shortage of essential items, including medicine and fuel, and daily power cuts. In response, Sri Lankans have taken to the streets over the last year to demand change. And back in July, their efforts worked. Gotabaya Rajapaksa was forced to flee the country and then resigned after thousands of protesters occupied his office and residence. Sri Lankan President Ranil Wickremesinghe took office and pledged to put the economy back on track. But he also cracked down on protesters, saying they are destabilizing the country.
Destabilize the country!
No!
What did the police do? They stopped the peaceful protest. Do you know what happened today just before the protest? The Chamber of Commerce put out a statement and they said, we were destabilizing the country. I want to ask the Chamber of Commerce, who destabilized the country? Your people, your members.
Among other restrictions, in September last year, the Sri Lankan government invoked the Official Secrets Act. It designates public streets and government buildings in central Colombo as high-security zones. Under the regulation, police have wide-ranging authority to arrest anyone inside those areas. Human Rights Watch says the government has also repeatedly invoked the Prevention of Terror Act against protest leaders, while police and security agencies enjoy complete impunity on violations related to freedom of peaceful assembly. Now, just last month, one protester was killed and more than 24 were hospitalized.
After holding a protest, we were holding a rally when the police purposely tried to create a clash and attack the women of this country. From this, you can understand who wants to create violence in this country.
By now, the people are facing a multitude of problems. They can't have 3 meals a day. Democracy is facing a serious challenge with a major crackdown underway. People don't have the right to express their views. That is why the peaceful sit-in protest yesterday was mercilessly attacked and some people were arrested.
But things could be turning around for the country. The crisis-hit island has secured financing assurances from all its major creditors, including India and China. The central bank governor says the stage is set for the IMF to give its final approval for a $2.9 billion 4-year bailout package on the 20th of March.
When you see the staff-level agreement published, that will contain our commitment to debt restructuring. That will also reveal medium-term debt targets for us to restore sustainability on a long-term basis. Somewhere in April, we will announce how we're going to meet those medium to long-term debt targets. That is the next step.
So the focus for the government right now is on stabilizing the economy. But for some protesters, voting should come first. Well, joining me now to debate what's best for Sri Lanka are all from Colombo, former advisor to President Ranil Wickremesinghe, Aruna Kulatunga, human rights activist Ruki Fernando, and lawyer and South Asia researcher at Amnesty International, Thyagi Ruwanpathirana. Thanks all so much for being with me. Let's first address, if we can, the latest images that we've been seeing and the protesters that are demanding local elections be held. The president has said, basically, please, let's first settle the economy, then we can worry about elections and move on with political challenges. The government, has said they don't even have the funds, actually, to hold an election right now. So, Ruki, should people just be patient with a government they may not have voted for, but for the sake of the greater good, wait it out?
There's no need for people to be patient. Ordinary people are not the cause of the crisis that we are facing. Successive governments, including governments where the present president held a senior leadership position, is responsible for the crisis that we are facing now. So it's grossly unfair to ask people to be patient. We also have to remember that the government has plenty of money, for example, to spend a lot of money on tear gas, for example, spending millions of rupees of Sri Lankan taxpayers' money to oppress Sri Lankan citizens themselves. We also saw a lot of extravagance for the Independence Day celebrations. So it's not actually accurate to say that there is no money.
Okay, let me ask Aruna if that's a fair argument.
It is fair. I have no qualms about agreeing with that. We appear to have the money, and there's no, I don't think the quantum of money is maybe very different. I mean, you are asking for 10 billion rupees for this local government election. I honestly think it is not about money. We all know what it is about, and let's be open about it. The current government is unable to face the vote at the moment, and therefore they will try their best to prolong these local government elections. But on the other hand, what the president is asking is very simple. I mean, let the economy be stabilized first, then we can have all of these elections. I'm just going back to something that I've seen very recently. There was a study done by World Bank. This is also with IMF, and this is comparing 36 countries that first were in default situation, and they went to IMF for this extended financing. And out of that only, and this is all the countries that was in that same situation as we were.
Right. I think you said only about 4% of them survived.
Sorry?
We need to give equal time to everybody, but I know that the argument was 4% of them really out of all these countries were able to survive the political instability in order to deal with the IMF loans and the conditions. So it's interesting, though, Aruna, because you seem to agree with the protesters and the cause that they are demanding. They deserve elections.
I'm not agreeing. I'm not actually agreeing with
the
the
protesters. Well, you agreed with Ruki that it was
I'm
fair.
I'm agreeing with Ruwan, basically saying that, look, the government doesn't have an excuse to say that it doesn't have the money. And what I'm saying is it is not the money that is the situation here. As far as the elections, why they are not holding the elections, that is an excuse. That is, in my opinion, it's wrong.
Okay.
But at the same time, on the other hand, talking from the government position, we need to have political stability if we are going to come out of this situation and get economic stability.
Okay.
So if you go for the election, the government is fearing that there won't be political stability. And that is, I think, where the things don't match up.
Understood. Ruki, I'll just let you respond to that then quickly, because, right, I mean, in the interest, as the government is saying, even if they are manipulating some of the actual facts here about what can and cannot be afforded, political stability for right now should be the priority. Do you accept that?
Political stability is not about getting everyone to agree with the economic policies that the president is proposing. Sri Lanka has been to the IMF 16 times, and we are still in a major crisis. So suppressing dissenting opinions is not political stability. Political stability is about tolerating, welcoming dissent, appreciating constructive suggestions and recommendations made by people with different political or economic ideological perspectives. And also, when someone is very hungry, when someone doesn't have proper health care, there cannot be stability. They are likely to be very agitated. So social economic rights is as important as civil and political rights.
Okay. Thyagi, interestingly enough, I actually spoke to a Sri Lankan voter today that participated in the protests 8 months ago, but told me that the ones underway now are protesters that are kind of on the fringes. And she was more of in favor of the government's argument that right now, maybe they shouldn't be out on the street because tourism, for example, has bounced back. There seems to be a sense of some stability now in the country that people want to at least enjoy. But she said that the police response has still been unacceptable, even if these protesters were arguably somewhat on the margins here. Where do you stand as a human rights activist? Are the police responding appropriately to what they're seeing?
The right to protest is something we have under international law. It's something in our constitution as well. So, you know, whether or not people should be protesting is really not up for debate, right? Because why people get on the road is a personal decision, and there are plenty of reasons to be out on the road. As Ruki mentioned as well, since February last year, people have been protesting because of the economic situation. They sought accountability, they sought resignations, all because of the situation we're in, and trying to see who was responsible and trying to ensure that these things don't happen again. And at the same time, just over the past few months, there have been quite a lot of changes, right? For example, there's been a massive electricity tariff hike. There's been massive taxes, income taxes that were announced. So people understandably are really squeezed in a context where inflation is very high, the rupee is devalued quite a bit, so we spend quite a lot on imports. So I believe, in my opinion, the reasons why people are on the streets are very legitimate, but we don't even need to go whether the reason why people are on the streets is legitimate or not. It's a fundamental right of the people to do this. And instead of being at war with the people, I believe this is actually an opportunity for the government to be communicating with the people who are agitated and out on the streets. They should be explaining and communicating why these tough reforms may be needed and when we're going to have, you know, how we're going to come out of it, what are the social sort of safeguards and safety nets that are going to be put in place to assist people. But instead, what we're seeing is brutality on the roads.
Okay, Aruna, is the government actually missing what would be a very good opportunity for dialogue right now to just better engage with the people?
I take the point very pretty well. I think yes, communication-wise, the government has failed, and that has been continuously an issue with President Wickremesinghe, where his ground communication has not really worked at all. But there's always a but in here. He appears to be focusing all of his communication in Parliament. So unlike the previous presidents, Wickremesinghe has been coming to Parliament, and he has been every development that has happened. In fact, the day before yesterday, I believe he came to Parliament and explained what happened with the IMF and with China and why the delay was. So all of that, he comes to the Parliament and explains that. So I think he expects the parliamentarians to go outside and talk to their constituents. That is obviously not happening. So that's bad communication. I completely agree with that.
Okay.
At the same time, I do move around with these protesters. I know them. I've been a victim of state suppression myself. So I know how they feel. My family is very directly involved in these protests at the moment. They are not in a mood to talk to the government. And they will not talk to the government. So whatever this particular, I won't call them a fringe crowd, because within this, the picture that we are seeing right now is in fact probably a party that will take about 35% of the vote if the local government vote is taken up. In that particular party, they were some years ago, they would have been called fringe, no longer fringe. However, they are not in a mood to discuss with the government, and whatever the I would say the moves that the government has made to discuss things with them has failed, because there was an all-party discussion. Nobody came for that.
Okay.
So people, the question is, who are the people here?
Yeah.
And
well,
the majority of the people are not the people who are protesting outside.
Okay, let me ask Ruki a little bit more about that. I mean, as for what the demands are right now and whether or not these protesters we're seeing on the streets at the present time actually represent, you know, a majority or even, you know, a large minority of the Sri Lankan people, you are still asking for an election as well. So tell us what you really are hoping And remember, the date, April 25th, has been thrown around. It may happen then. We're still not sure. But what are you expecting as far as an election is concerned anyway? Who is there to fill the void and do a better job, given that at least the government now has delivered something from the IMF?
First and foremost, I think it's incorrect to say that the government has delivered something from the IMF. There's no conclusive agreement that has been finalized as of now. So there has been various statements from last year, various promises, and those have not been confirmed as of now. And as I said before, I'm quite skeptical whether the agreement with the IMF will take us forward in any ways, considering the past experiences that we've had. But people who are protesting are generally people who have grievances. No, whether we take Sri Lanka has a long history of protest. If we take even last year, there were families have disappeared from the war-affected regions in the north and east who were protesting, trying to find out whether they are family members who disappeared or dead or alive. So there were people whose lands were being forcibly taken by the military during the war and immediately after the war, even in recent times, protesting to safeguard their lands, which also involves their identity, which involves their livelihood, culture, etc. And people who don't have food, people who don't have fuel, people who don't have gas, people who will not be able to afford electricity will protest. So that is the people who protest. People who are affected by wild elephants will protest. Farmers who don't have fertilizer will protest. So this is the ordinary people of Sri Lanka who have some problems, some grievances that are not being addressed by the state. Now, local government elections is important because local bodies have the capacity to address some local level problems. No, they will not be able to come up with national policy, but at the local level, they can play a significant role. And that is why that is very important. But at the same time, the local elections will also indicate the public mood. Now, the question was asked whether people who protest are fringe or whether they are the majority. I think Aruna mentioned that the party whose images were shown, the National People's Power, might probably get 25% or 35%, according to some opinion polls.
Okay.
But the people who are protesting, if they vote, then we will really see an indication of what their grievances are.
Okay.
And whether they are for the majority or what percentage they are.
Okay.
Without the election, it's very difficult to see the overall national public mood.
Ruki, I wanted to go back actually to what you were saying initially about the IMF bailout itself, the fact that you're not convinced it's totally been secured. Anyway, you mentioned this is the 17th now bailout that Sri Lanka has secured, 16th potentially. I'm seeing Aruna disagree. Ruki, you believe it is. Either way, the IMF, as well as China, India, and Japan, are set to help bail out Sri Lanka. And though it sounds like good news on paper right now, the question is, will Sri Lanka be able to pay back that debt, or is it just entering another miserable cycle? Ruki, what do you think?
I think we are entering another miserable cycle, and I think we are being very, very unfair to our future generations. And I think we have to look at alternatives to the IMF. Particularly, we have to look at getting back the money, offshore money that our exporters have. I think this is far more bigger than the amount that we are talking about IMF, 2.9 billion. In terms of offshore money stored that we need to find a way of getting back, we are talking about 30 billion to 50 billion.
Okay.
That's much more.
Yeah.
And I think we need to focus on stolen asset recovery. We need to look at progressive tax reform, not the kind of reform that we just have. So wealth taxes, we need to think of multiple ways of alternatives to the IMF.
Okay. Thyagi, I'm going to come to you. Aruna, I know you have a comment, and please hold on to your thoughts right there. Because even though Ruki is mentioning this offshore money as one way to get some of the revenue back that should be in Sri Lankan accounts, Thyagi, part of the solution that the government is pitching is to have raised taxes and cut public services. I'm asking you as a Sri Lankan, how much more can they cut? And what has that meant to your daily life and the daily lives of even poorer Sri Lankans who've been struggling, arguably like never before in their lifetimes?
Yeah. Let's look at the context, right? I think there are a lot of sectors that have suffered because we've come out of the COVID pandemic. The tourism sector suffered. A lot of day wage earners already suffered quite a bit because of the lockdowns as well. And then right as we were sort of trying to come out of the COVID situation, came in the economic crisis, right? So Sri Lanka has, had to struggle with multiple challenges over multiple years. And, this hasn't been made any easier with the sort of corruption that's around, with the kind of governance structures that have been around. So I think this is really what has really frustrated people. And I think with taxes, right now, as it stands, the highest tax bracket is about 36%, which may be in line with, say, global standards. But at the same time, we're now taxing people who are earning as little as 100,000. I don't believe my living standards change to the effect that people on the streets are suffering right now. Day wage earners, people who are living in sort of urban areas, who also don't have sort of garden space to grow vegetables, people who can't afford to get, like, say, kerosene to go fishing. There are multiple issues at stake right now, and that's really why there should have been better consultation with the public about the tax reforms that are going to be brought ahead. But that's the thing, right? It sort of was slumped on people sort of almost overnight. There were discussions late last year that this might come on as early as December, and then come January, it's already in effect. And this is really coming as a shock to people, because the previous previous president slashed taxes quite a bit. So from that point to this big jump is a big shock to the system. And that's why these progressive tax reforms that Ruki was also mentioning, that should have been in place for a long time. And I think just like focusing on stolen asset recovery and getting money that's stashed abroad back, we also need to figure out ways of closing loopholes in the system for people to stop avoiding taxes.
Okay. Aruna, I can see you agree with most of what Thyagi said, but I also wanted to get your thoughts on Ruki's comments saying that Sri Lanka is basically just entering the same miserable cycle of kind of boom and bust, I guess, by entering with this IMF loan. Go ahead.
If we can achieve political stability, and if we can continue with the processes that are now being in place, because as I was saying before, what has happened was that in every single one of the 16 times that we went to the IMF previously, we were never able to complete the reformation processes that was asked and we promised to deliver. This time, we are doing it. So this time, there's a chance, and a very big chance, that we can come out of this and make the payments as well. Crucial question is, we have to pay on an average $6 to $7 billion in the next 5 years to pay off all our debt. Now, however, the way we are doing it, we will obviously go to take more debt to pay off the current debt. So what we need to do is then, how do we make more money? We have to increase our exports and control our imports. That's the main thing about this. It's the balance of payments that is we have to look at, and that is what is being done at the moment. So I think there will be hardship. I mean, I'm being taxed at the highest rate at the moment, and I'm suffering as most other people are. But it is something that we have to go through if we are going to come out of this.
Okay, so Ruki, I guess some people believe it's different this time. They're a lot more optimistic. But I also have to ask about and Thyagi was alluding to this. It really is about the legacy of Gotabaya Rajapaksa. And the damage that was done by some of the tax codes that he enacted, and also even down to things like cutting fertilizers in the agricultural sector that caused even a food crisis in the country. How much is the legacy of his policies, how much is it still there? How much does Sri Lanka really have to recover from in the lasting damage that was arguably done?
Well, I think we have to look at Gotabaya Rajapaksa's legacy as two parts. One is a short legacy of about 2 years when he was the president. Then we had to look at the legacy of him as a defense secretary when his brother Mahinda was the president. And I think you were talking primarily alluding to about the economic dimensions. But yes, so that the economic disaster is a legacy that he will leave. And he has acknowledged certain mistakes that he had made, like, for example, the fertilizer policy, which led to massive protest across Sri Lanka in farms, in paddy fields, in late 2021. But before that, I think there is also two other legacies. One is the legacy of corruption. And this is where I think the stolen asset recovery is very, very important. That legacy was largely in between 2006 to 2014, when he was the secretary to the Ministry of Defense, and his brother was Mahinda was the president, and various others like Basil Rajapaksa were in very powerful positions. Then there's the third legacy. That legacy is of massive human rights violations during the war, but also after the war. Large numbers of people killed, disappeared with no solution. So that's the kind of legacy that we are left with Gotabaya Rajapaksa of authoritarianism, corruption, and of racism.
We're going to have to leave it there, actually, because that is really all the time. The clock is against us. And that is all, then, for this edition of the Newsmakers. I'd like to thank my three panelists really so much for being with us, and our viewers, of course, for tuning in as well to this fascinating discussion. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter, and do be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.